The reluctant bride. What would you do if you were forced to marry a complete stranger to save your family? What if that stranger was one of the most powerful and mysterious men in the city? And what if everything you expected about your wedding night turned out to be completely wrong? This is the incredible story of Celeste Rivera, a young woman whose life changed forever on one fateful evening. But before we reveal what happened behind closed doors that shocked everyone who knew them, let us take you back to where it all began. Have you ever wondered what goes through someone's mind when they're walking down the aisle toward a person they barely know? Can love really bloom from the most unlikely circumstances? Stay with us, because what happened next will challenge everything you think you know about arranged marriages and true love. Celeste Rivera stood before the ornate mirror in the bridal suite, her hands trembling as she touched the champagne-colored silk gown that felt more like a costume than a wedding dress. At 23, she had always imagined her wedding day would be the happiest day of her life. Instead, she felt like she was preparing for her own funeral. But why was this bright, intelligent young teacher being forced into marriage? The answer lay in a series of events that had torn her family apart just months earlier. The Rivera family had owned Coraz and DM Zico, a beloved Mexican restaurant in downtown Phoenix, for over 20 years. It was more than just a business, it was their heart, their soul, their legacy. Rosa and Miguel Rivera had poured their lives into making it a place where families gathered, where celebrations happened, and where the community found comfort in authentic flavors and warm hospitality. Everything changed the night Miguel Rivera collapsed while working late in the kitchen. The massive heart attack left him fighting for his life in the intensive care unit for 3 weeks. The medical bills began piling up like storm clouds, dark and threatening. The restaurant, already struggling with increased competition from chain establishments, couldn't survive without Miguel's leadership and Rosa's attention, which was entirely focused on her husband's recovery. Mija, we're going to lose everything, Rosa had whispered to Celeste one evening in the hospital waiting room. The house, the restaurant, your papa's medical care, everything. That's when Nathan Cross entered their lives like a character from a fairy tale, or perhaps a cautionary story, depending on how you looked at it. The 31-year-old technology mogul had built his empire from nothing, creating software solutions that revolutionized how small businesses operated. His name appeared regularly in business magazines, always accompanied by the same description: brilliant, wealthy, and mysteriously private. But what connection could a tech billionaire possibly have to a struggling family restaurant? The answer was both simpler and more complex than anyone could have imagined. Nathan's late grandmother, Elena Cross, had been a regular customer at Coraz and DM Zico during the final years of her life. After losing her own husband, she had found solace in the warm atmosphere of the Rivera's restaurant. She would sit at the same corner table every Tuesday evening, ordering the same meal, chicken mole with extra rice, and chatting with whoever had time to listen to her stories. Miguel and Rosa had treated Elena like family, never charging her full price for her meals, and always ensuring someone sat with her when the restaurant was quiet. When Elena passed away peacefully in her sleep at age 87, she left behind specific instructions in her will, instructions that would change the Rivera family's fate forever. The will contained an unusual provision. Nathan would inherit his grandmother's entire estate, worth over $50 million, but only if he married within 1 year of her death, and demonstrated the same kindness to struggling families that she had always shown. The money was to be used for a charitable foundation supporting small family businesses. Elena had watched her grandson build his fortune while remaining emotionally isolated. She believed that marriage and responsibility to others would soften his heart and give his success true meaning. She had specifically mentioned the Rivera family in her will, noting their kindness to her and suggesting they might be worthy of assistance. When Nathan's lawyers approached the Riveras with an unusual proposition, it seemed like the answer to their prayers, or perhaps a deal with the devil. Nathan would pay all of Miguel's medical bills, save the restaurant, and provide Celeste with financial security for life. In exchange, she would marry him for a period of 2 years, helping him fulfill the conditions of his inheritance. It's just a business arrangement, the lawyer had explained in his cold, professional tone. Mr. Cross requires a wife to access his inheritance. Miss Rivera requires financial assistance for her family. It's mutually beneficial. But what kind of man makes such a proposal? What were his real intentions? And what was Celeste getting herself into? Standing in that bridal suite, Celeste tried to imagine the man she was about to marry. She had met Nathan Cross only twice, once when the arrangement was proposed, and once to sign the legal documents. He was undeniably handsome, with dark hair that always looked perfectly styled, piercing green eyes that seemed to see everything, and a presence that commanded attention wherever he went. During their brief meetings, he had been polite but distant, treating their conversations like business negotiations rather than interactions between two people whose lives were about to become legally intertwined. He answered her questions directly, but revealed nothing personal about himself. She knew his net worth, his business achievements, and his public persona, but she knew absolutely nothing about his heart. Señorita Rivera, it's time, announced the wedding coordinator, a perfectly groomed woman who had managed every detail of this elaborate affair with military precision. As Celeste took one last look at herself in the mirror, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was about to step into a story whose ending she couldn't predict. Would Nathan Cross prove to be the cold businessman he appeared to be? Would their arrangement remain purely professional? And what exactly did he expect from their wedding night? The ceremony was being held in the ballroom of Phoenix's most exclusive hotel, decorated with thousands of white orchids and soft candlelight that created an atmosphere of romantic elegance that felt entirely artificial given the circumstances. As Celeste walked down the aisle on her father's arm, Miguel had recovered enough to attend. Though he still looked frail, she passed rows of guests she didn't recognize. Nathan's business associates, investors, and society figures filled the ornate space, while her own family and friends occupied just a few rows on the bride's side. Nathan stood waiting at the altar in an impeccably tailored black tuxedo, looking like he had stepped out of a magazine cover. When their eyes met across the flower-strewn aisle, Celeste felt something unexpected, a flutter of curiosity mixed with nervous anticipation. For just a moment, his composed expression seemed to soften, and she glimpsed something vulnerable beneath his polished exterior. The ceremony proceeded with the mechanical precision of a well-rehearsed performance. Celeste heard herself reciting vows she didn't mean to a man she barely knew, promising to love and honor someone who was essentially a stranger. Nathan's voice was steady and controlled as he spoke his responses, but there was something in his tone that made her wonder if this arrangement was as easy for him as he pretended. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, Nathan lifted her veil with surprisingly gentle hands and pressed a soft, respectful kiss to her lips. It was brief and careful, but something about it made Celeste's heart skip in a way she hadn't expected. As the guests applauded and cameras flashed around them, Celeste realized that her real story was just beginning. Whatever happened next would determine whether this marriage of convenience would remain a business transaction or evolve into something neither of them had planned for. But first, they had to get through their wedding night, and what happened in those private moments would surprise everyone, including themselves. The shocking revelation. What do you think happens when a young woman finds herself alone with a powerful stranger on their wedding night? What would you expect from a man who essentially bought a wife to secure his inheritance? The answers to these questions will challenge every assumption you might have about Nathan Cross and reveal a side of him that no one could have predicted. The elevator ride to Nathan's penthouse seemed to last forever. Each floor they climbed adding to Celeste's anxiety. She clutched her small overnight bag, still wearing her wedding dress, and sure of what awaited her in the luxury apartment 40 floors above the city. Nathan stood beside her, his attention focused on his phone as he handled what appeared to be urgent business matters, seemingly oblivious to her growing nervousness. But was he really as indifferent as he appeared? Or was there more happening beneath his composed exterior? Here we are, Nathan said as the elevator doors opened directly into his apartment. Celeste gasped despite her determination to appear unimpressed. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking panoramic view of Phoenix's glittering skyline, while the interior showcased understated luxury. Everything was pristine, modern, and intimidatingly perfect. Your room is down this hall, Nathan said. leading her past a spacious living area furnished with sleek leather furniture and contemporary art. "I had my assistant prepare everything you might need." He stopped at a door and pushed it open, revealing a beautifully appointed guest bedroom, complete with its own bathroom, sitting area, and even a small balcony overlooking the city. Celeste stared at him in complete confusion. "My room?" she asked, her voice betraying her bewilderment. "I assumed we would be. I mean, this is our wedding night." Nathan's expression remained carefully neutral, but she noticed his jaw tighten slightly. "I assumed you would prefer your own space. The marriage contract doesn't require us to share living quarters, only to maintain the appearance of a committed relationship for public purposes." What was happening here? This wasn't what she had expected at all. Was Nathan Cross showing her respect? Or was there something else behind his decision to keep their relationship strictly platonic? "I don't understand," Celeste said, setting down her bag and turning to face him fully. "You paid a substantial amount of money to marry me. Most men in your position would expect certain privileges." Nathan moved to the window, his hands clasped behind his back as he gazed out at the city lights. When he spoke, his voice carried a weight she hadn't heard before. "Celeste, I need you to understand something important. I'm fully aware that this marriage wasn't your choice. Your family's financial crisis forced you into this arrangement, and I refuse to take advantage of that fact." The words hung in the air between them, and Celeste felt her preconceived notions about this cold businessman beginning to shift. There was something in his tone, a gentleness, perhaps even vulnerability that she hadn't expected. "You know about our situation," she said. Though it wasn't really a question, "Know everything," Nathan replied, turning back to face her. "The medical bills, the struggling restaurant, the impossible choice your parents faced. I also know that you're an art teacher who spends her weekends volunteering at the animal shelter, that you paint watercolor landscapes in your spare time, and that you've never had a serious relationship because you've been too busy taking care of everyone else." Celeste felt her cheeks burn with a mixture of embarrassment and something else. Was it disappointment? "You investigated me, needed to ensure we would be compatible living together. But more importantly, I needed to understand who you are as a person." Nathan's expression became more open, more honest than she had seen before. "Celeste, I may be wealthy, but I'm not a monster. I would never force myself on an unwilling partner, regardless of what any contract might say." The sincerity in his voice was unmistakable, and Celeste found herself seeing Nathan Cross in an entirely new light. This wasn't the cold, calculating businessman she had expected to face on her wedding night. "Then why?" she asked softly. "Why did you agree to this marriage? You could have helped my family without marrying me." Nathan was quiet for a long moment, and Celeste could see him wrestling with something internal. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "My grandmother left me her trust fund with very specific conditions. I must be married by my 32nd birthday to access it, and that money is needed for a charitable foundation I'm establishing in her memory. She believed that marriage would make me a better person, more connected to others. And you think a marriage of convenience will accomplish that? I hoped it would at least provide companionship for two people who might otherwise be alone." Nathan's admission was startlingly honest. "I've never been particularly good at personal relationships. Work has always been easier, more predictable. But my grandmother was right about one thing: success means nothing if you have no one to share it with." Celeste sank into the plush armchair by the window, her elaborate dress pulling around her like sea foam. This conversation was nothing like what she had prepared herself for. "I was terrified," she admitted, looking up at him. "I spent weeks dreading this moment, imagining the worst possible scenarios. I thought you would see me as property, something you had purchased." "Never." Nathan's voice was firm, almost fierce. "If and when we ever become intimate, it will be because we both want it, not because a piece of paper says we should. You have my word on that." The relief Celeste felt was overwhelming. She had spent so many sleepless nights worrying about this moment, and instead of finding herself trapped with a demanding stranger, she had discovered a man showing her more respect and consideration than she had dared hope for. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now we get to know each other. We learn to be partners." maybe even friends. There's no timeline, no pressure. Nathan's expression softened further. Would you like some tea? I could change out of this tuxedo, and we could talk like normal people instead of contract signatories. For the first time since the engagement had been announced, Celeste smiled genuinely. I would like that very much. 20 minutes later, they sat in Nathan's modern kitchen, both transformed from their wedding finery into comfortable clothes. Nathan wore dark jeans and a soft gray sweater that made him look younger and more approachable, while Celeste had changed into leggings and an oversized cardigan, her hair freed from its elaborate wedding style. Tell me about your art, Nathan said, pouring tea from an elegant ceramic pot. What do you love about painting? How did you know I paint? Celeste asked, though she was beginning to suspect the answer. Nathan's cheeks actually colored slightly. I may have purchased one of your pieces from that small gallery downtown. The sunset over Camelback Mountain. It hangs in my home office. Celeste nearly choked on her tea. You bought my painting? It captured something I'd never been able to put into words, Nathan said, his eyes meeting hers. The way you painted the light suggested that beautiful things can emerge from difficult circumstances. It reminded me of hope. He paused, then added quietly, I had no idea then that the artist would become my wife. As they talked through the night, sharing stories about their childhoods, their dreams, their fears and hopes, Celeste discovered that Nathan Cross was nothing like the cold businessman portrayed in the media. He was thoughtful, surprisingly funny when he relaxed, and deeply passionate about using his success to help others. He told her about his grandmother's influence on his life, about feeling isolated despite his wealth, and about his genuine desire to make a positive impact on the world. In return, Celeste shared her own story growing up in a family that valued love and community over material success. Her struggles as a young teacher trying to make a difference, her dreams of having her art recognized, and her fears about losing her identity in this arranged marriage. As dawn broke over the Phoenix skyline, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold that reminded Celeste of her own watercolor palettes, she realized that something unexpected was happening. The fear and dread she had carried for months was slowly being replaced by curiosity and, surprisingly, hope. Nathan had proven himself to be honorable, kind, and far more complex than she had imagined. But would their respectful beginning lead to something deeper? Could a relationship built on practical necessity ever become something real? The answers to those questions would unfold in the months to come, but for now, Celeste felt something she hadn't experienced in a very long time, the possibility that her future might hold unexpected joy. Love blooms unexpectedly. Can a marriage that begins as a business transaction ever become something real? Can two people who barely know each other learn to love genuinely and deeply? What happens when respect and kindness are given time to grow into something beautiful? 3 months after their wedding, Celeste woke to the rich aroma of fresh coffee and the sound of someone moving around in the kitchen. This had become a pleasant morning routine. Nathan was an early riser who often prepared breakfast before heading to his office. But finding him at the stove, wearing an apron over his business shirt, with jazz music playing softly in the background, still made her heart skip a little. Good morning, Mrs. Cross, he said, with a smile that had grown increasingly warm over the weeks. The formal address had become a playful joke between them rather than a reminder of their contractual arrangement. Good morning yourself, Celeste replied, padding into the kitchen in her pajamas and robe. What's all this? She gestured to the elaborate breakfast spread he was preparing. Fresh fruit, pancakes shaped like hearts, scrambled eggs with herbs from the small garden they had started on the balcony, and even a small bouquet of wildflowers in a mason jar. It's our 3-month anniversary, Nathan said, his tone light but his eyes serious. I thought we should celebrate making it this far without driving each other crazy. Celeste laughed, a sound that had become much more frequent in their shared apartment. Their marriage had evolved in ways neither of them had anticipated. What had begun as polite cohabitation had gradually transformed into genuine companionship, then friendship, and recently into something that felt remarkably like. But neither of them had dared to name it yet. I have something for you, Nathan said, producing a small wrapped package from behind the coffee maker. Inside was a set of professional watercolor paints, the kind Celeste had always dreamed of owning, but could never justify purchasing. The colors were vibrant and rich, the quality far superior to anything in her current collection. "Nathan, these are too expensive," she protested, though she was already imagining the paintings she could create with such beautiful materials. "They're an investment in your talent," he replied seriously. "I've been thinking about what you said last week about wanting to show your work in more galleries. I'd like to help make that happen, if you'll let me." Over the past 3 months, Nathan had become her biggest supporter and advocate. He had convinced the owner of an upscale gallery to visit their apartment to see her work, had helped her create a professional portfolio, and had even commissioned her to paint a series of landscapes for his office building's lobby. "Why are you being so good to me?" Celeste asked, her voice thick with emotion. Nathan set down his coffee cup and looked at her with an expression that made her breath catch. "Because you deserve goodness. Because you've brought light into a life that was all work and no joy. Because," he paused, seeming to gather courage, "because I'm falling in love with you." The words hung in the air between them, changing everything. Celeste felt tears spring to her eyes as she looked into Nathan's face and saw the truth there, along with vulnerability and fear. Somewhere along the way, between late-night conversations about their dreams and shared laughter over cooking disasters, between his patient encouragement of her art and her gentle teasing about his workaholic tendencies, love had bloomed in the space where only a contract had existed before. "Nathan," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I know this complicates everything," he said quickly. "I know you didn't sign up for this when you agreed to marry me. If you need time, or if you can't return these feelings, I understand. We can continue as we have been, as friends and partners, and I'll never pressure you or make you uncomfortable." Instead of answering with words, Celeste stood and moved around the kitchen island to where he waited, his green eyes filled with hope and terror in equal measure. Reaching up, she cupped his face in her hands, marveling at how right it felt to touch him this way. "You wonderful, patient man," she said softly. "Don't you know that I've been falling in love with you too?" The kiss that followed was nothing like the polite, respectful peck they had shared at their wedding ceremony. This kiss was full of discovered love, of 3 months of growing intimacy and trust, of 2 hearts that had found each other against all odds. When they broke apart, both were breathing heavily and Celeste could see tears in Nathan's eyes. "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice rough with emotion. "I need you to be sure, because if you let me love you completely, I don't think I could survive losing you. I've never been more certain of anything in my life," Celeste replied, her own tears flowing freely. "I love how gentle you are with me, how you support my dreams without trying to control them. I love your sense of humor, your generosity, your dedication to helping others. I love the man you are when you're not trying to be the perfect businessman." That evening, for the first time since their wedding night, Celeste walked into Nathan's bedroom not as an obligation or duty, but as a choice born of love and desire. What passed between them was tender and passionate, a true wedding night that had been worth waiting for. In the weeks that followed, their relationship deepened in every way. Celeste's art show, sponsored by Nathan but featuring her talent alone, was a tremendous success. Several pieces sold to collectors, and she received commissions for custom work. Nathan began joining her for volunteer work at the animal shelter, discovering a love for rescue dogs he never knew he had. They traveled together, exploring art museums and natural wonders that inspired Celeste's paintings. They cooked together, learned together, and built a life that felt authentic and chosen rather than imposed by circumstances. 6 months after their contract wedding, Nathan surprised Celeste with a proposal not for business purposes or legal obligations, but for love. "Celeste Rivera Cross," he said, kneeling in the same desert botanical garden where she had often gone to paint before they met. "Will you marry me again? Not because we have to, but because I can't imagine spending my life with anyone else." Through happy tears, Celeste said yes to the man who had started as a stranger, become her friend, and was now the love of her life. Their second wedding was small and intimate, surrounded only by family and close friends who had watched their unlikely love story unfold. Miguel and Rosa Rivera, both healthy and proud, walked their daughter down the aisle again. This time, Celeste wore a simple white dress she had chosen herself, and Nathan's eyes never left her face as she approached him. Their vows, written from the heart, were promises of real love, born from the most unexpected circumstances. They spoke of patience, respect, growing together, and choosing each other every day, from obligation, but from deep, abiding love. What shocked everyone who knew their story wasn't the arranged marriage or the business contract that had brought them together. What amazed their friends and family was how two people, thrown together by necessity, had discovered that sometimes the most beautiful love stories begin with the most practical arrangements. Their marriage became a testament to the truth that love cannot be forced or manufactured, but when tended with patience, respect, and genuine care, it can bloom in the most unexpected places. Nathan and Celeste proved that when two people are committed to truly seeing and valuing each other, even the most unlikely beginnings can lead to the deepest, most authentic love. As they danced at their second wedding reception, Celeste whispered in Nathan's ear, "Thank you for waiting for my heart to catch up with yours. Thank you for teaching me that love is worth waiting for," he replied, spinning her under the stars. Their story reminds us that true love is built not on passion alone, but on the foundation of mutual respect, genuine friendship, and the daily choice to cherish and support the person you've committed to. Sometimes, the most extraordinary love stories are the ones that begin with ordinary kindness and grow into something that transforms two lives forever.